Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Blue Stinger. In the last part, we cleared Lab Town and made our way here since we need to restore electricity to certain gates. And now we're coming up towards this giant tank. There's another route you can take to get to the destination, but when you try to go that way, you'll eventually come across a gate that is locked. So we do need to come over here to this giant bulbous tank standing over this very obvious ravine. Holy shit.
It's history. Can't go any further.
Don't give up so easily.
I'm gonna guess it was the impact of whatever meteor hit that caused this ravine. Now, we got 3 important items there. The fuel tank card, which is just an item you need for progression, so you can see that the ravine is there, period. And the life hooks. Life hooks are not used too often in this game. I can only think of 2 areas where they're regularly used. But what they are is if you fall off into a bottomless pit, because the game does have some of those, you'll come back with just some damage taken.
Warning. Personnel without Level 1 pyrotechnic clearance are not allowed beyond this point. Intake system. This system takes air from the top level of the tank to avoid corrosion. Do not expose to heat. System lock. Currently, the system is not engaged. Please remove the lock cap from an intake hole.
Okay, and now we have this little puzzle of sorts. As that computer said, the intake valves are how they make sure that there's no corrosion in this tank. So what happens if you light the intake valve on fire? Well, I think you can probably figure out what happens from there, but we have to destroy at least one of the intake valves, I think. I'm not sure if destroying one or multiple of these 3 up here causes any difference. Maybe it makes the actual effect at the end of this section slower or not. I'm not sure. I usually destroy all 3 just because it makes me feel good to punch those things and actually cause some environmental damage. From here, we need to go back down to that computer in order to progress, because while, yes, the intake valves are on fire, the intake system isn't being used at the moment, so we need to make sure that it activates before things get a little chaotic, to be frank.
Warning. Personnel without Level 1 pyrotechnic clearance are not allowed beyond this point. Intake system. This system takes air from the top level of the tank to avoid corrosion. Do not expose to heat. Would you like to activate the intake system? Emergency. 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 First degree warning. Intake system is on fire. Tank will explode momentarily.
Alright, so now we want to immediately run back up, because even though I don't show it off, there's a reason you might hear a very low rumbling in the audio. We are being chased by a wall of fire that if it hits you, I believe is instant kill. So don't let that happen. Just walk back up, and when we get to the fork coming up here in the pathway, take the right instead of heading back towards the intake valves to escape through this madness. How that didn't manage to break any of our bones, I don't know, but at the same time, it's so stupid I can't help but laugh at that happening. With that said, we're now closing in on the power plant that our entire goal was going through here. And the annoying thing about this next section of the game is that it's probably the most maze-like portion of the game, period. Because as I mentioned / foreshadowed last part, a lot of the game moving forward is going to be very individual sections of level design that look distinct from one another, but within each of those chunks, it's hard to tell what exactly is happening where. And this is easily going to be the most maze-like in that regard. Here's a Jeep. There's a weapon on top of it. We can't grab it yet. Maybe later. But welcome to the power plant. As you could tell, despite being a power plant, it is very dark in here. So our first duty is to get the lights on in here, period, which thankfully is very easy to do because of this obvious light. Yes, I want to turn on the emergency light. Who wouldn't?
Well,
Well, I'm looking for the emergency light.
there should be a control panel close to the emergency light. Could you check it out?
Check. Got it.
So we turned on more or less the lights in the building now, but we still need to turn on the lights for everywhere else. Investigate this console.
Power system is off. Output OBA. Superconductivity power is non-functional. B43. R61. Y13. G32.
Keep in mind those numbers for later because they're very important. The first thing we need to do is go down this new stairwell that spawned when we turned on the lights and grab some items down on this subfloor. In particular, we are looking for electric wires through basically every single room in this area, though you can also find some extra healing items and ammunition should you need it. There's a lot of handgun and bowgun ammo in this part of the game in particular. The reason we're looking for these wires, though, as well as one other item to actually place them, is due to those superconductors that the computer just mentioned, like B43. We need to replace their faulty wires, and admittedly, this part of the game is kind of well organized in how much information they give you. For instance, those sets of letters and numbers, they're each referring to a specific superconductor we need to replace the wire in, and they're organized very well. For instance, let's look at the first set of letters and numbers, B43. The number indicates which hallway it's in, so B43 is in hallway B. The first number, in this case a 4, is the room number within that hallway, and each of the doors are going to be labeled when we get to them. Also, make sure you grab this crank. You can't proceed to that part of the game until you get that. So it would be in hallway B, room 4. The second number, in this case a 3, is the superconductor number with a faulty wire. So in this case, you're looking for hallway B's 4th room, and you need to investigate the third superconductor within there. With that said, this is arguably also one of the points in the game with one of the most annoying enemy sets, as I feel some of the most annoying enemies in the game, barring one non-boss fight variety, are in this section. Be it the dragonfly enemies we saw on the hallway run into this place, some little lightning bug looking guys that are very quick. This place is honestly one of the more lethal parts of the game, just in terms of how quickly you can get hit. The damage is probably a little more bite-sized than you might be used to, but they can combo you pretty quickly if you're not quick on killing them. Because of that, this is a place I can recommend using items that have either very fast rates of fire or very good homing. This is actually a place I can recommend using Dogs' Gatling gun, honestly, just for how well it tracks onto enemies. Because there is, admittedly, a bit of a generous aiming system in this game where as long as there's an enemy within your general range of sight, you are likely to auto-aim onto it with a good amount of items, technically speaking. Things like the shotgun might not do that, similarly with the rocket launchers. But like the bow gun generally has good auto-aim, the handgun, the railgun, things like that. They're at least generous enough with that, and that's probably more so a leftover from when this game used the more Resident Evil-like camera system in the Japanese version, because, admittedly, having a behind-the-back camera technically should make aiming easier, if the aiming controls were competent. Those are the lightning bug enemies in question, by the way. Alright, so here we are. We're in the first hallway. This is hallway B, so you want to go to room 4 and check the third superconductor. Later, as there are not only some items in some of the other rooms that we can grab, but before you place any wires, if you try to place them, you'll basically go, oh wait, this is a wire. If I replace this, God knows how much electricity will be pumped through it, so I probably shouldn't do that until I have some sort of insulator. Also in here we got the stun rod. It is technically a worse weapon than the Iron Fists, but might as well show it off. It's an electric baseball bat, more or less. Stronger, but slower. The Iron Fists are technically a better weapon overall. I'll just use it for a little bit here to show it off, more or less. The annoying thing is, in order to find the active insulator we need to replace the wires, you need to walk through just about every single hallway in this place, and due to that, you're walking back and forth through these hallways enough times to be annoying and confusing. And in fact, because of that, for people who might have trouble tracking through this entire part, if I ever do massive backtracks, I'm likely to be fast-forwarding them instead of cutting them out outright, because navigating this place can be confusing despite the well-organized nature of it. Not to mention, sometimes the doors in here can be a little hard to see depending on your lighting or your TV. Like, this is pretty dark right here. At least depending on the camera angle. A saving grace, thankfully, with this area is that since, of course, the lightning bugs and the dragonflies are not humanoid enemies, they won't respawn when you kill them, and since you can buy endless amounts of ammo for basically every weapon in this game, you can just go ham and murder everything and make things a little bit calmer for you, mostly. There are specific sets of lightning bugs and dragonflies that technically respawn, but that's more so due to an extenuating circumstance in that area. We'll see that in about 5-ish minutes, I think. Now, easily the most pain in the ass thing about this section is just how many of these rooms are empty. Because obviously there's some that have items, some that you need to enter to check the superconductors, but a lot of the other rooms are just distractions for you to wander in if you missed the hint with the computer earlier. And because of that, this section definitely feels like it's meant to be the most wander-y, so to speak. Thankfully, most of the game doesn't have too many, like, super empty rooms. By and large, every room in this game has some sort of purpose, as annoying or bland as it may be. So if anything, even though the level design isn't exactly the greatest in terms of how you wander through it, it's at least purposeful, I guess? We want to enter this particular room over here, though, because it has two things for us. The final bank card in the game, the Bermuda bank card, and the insulated gloves. Now that we have those, we can go through the various rooms that have faulty superconductors and actually fix them now. This is where writing down what superconductors you need to fix could probably come in handy, or you could be like me on my first playthrough and just wander around forgetting about that and going to fix each one individually until you find which ones you actually need to do it to. Don't be like me on my first playthrough, just go where I go or do what I do now and write down the actual superconductors you need to fix, because that's a lot of wandering that you could be saved. And I admittedly skip a bit of a step here coming up. What the game wants you to do once you fix all 4 superconductors is head back to that computer that we got the numbers from, and then figure out what else is wrong in this entire system. I skip past that and go straight to the next step, which is heading towards the ending of the area, so to speak. And it's also because of that little hint they tell you of where to go next, that I have a feeling they either forgot to have some lines recorded or lost their recordings of certain lines for certain characters in this part of the game, because there's suddenly subtitles without voiced dialogue, which is very uncharacteristic of the rest of the game, so something's wrong there. Also, this superconductor's kind of placed in a bad spot. It's placed right around where you can investigate to enter to the next area, and yeah, you can accidentally leave the room when trying to put that one in. It's not painful, but it can be annoying if you're just a little bit off and you have to re-enter again. It's like, come on, man. You couldn't have made it a little bit further from the door. This could also be my memory being faulty because this part of the game kind of blends together for me, but I think they also give you more electrical wires to replace the faulty ones than you actively need, so there's probably some rooms you can just outright skip. I think because, to be frank, I never commit this part of the game to memory. Either way, that's the final wire replaced.
Good timing. Let there be light.
Power system output is decreasing. The power supply outside the power plant will be terminated.
What? Hang on, let me check.
Maybe you should check the control panel by the emergency light switch again. So there was definitely a voiced line missing there, right? It almost seems like the text line they have Janine say there was meant to be an actual voice line, but either they lost the recording, They never recorded it, or the voice actress just wasn't available that day for some reason. It's weird. What? Either way, before we head back upstairs, we do want to come over here to get not only this box of shotgun shells, but on this console, there's a condenser room key. You need that in order to access the actual final rooms of the area, so make sure you grab that. And here's where I'm just going to speed back up, going through these hallways again, not cutting out in case people are getting lost, because I can understand getting lost here. With that said, we're now back in the main power room headquarters, I guess. And at this point, because we've replaced the wires, we can now head up here through this elevator to reach potentially the most dangerous part of this whole area. There's a reason we are finding so many life hooks. It's for this next little section. You can also buy multiples infinitely, from my memory, from this vending machine. I recommend buying a few extra ones if you're a little more new to the game, because it can be very easy to use them coming up. Because as I mentioned, the life hooks save you if you fall off into a bottomless pit. More or less, they just make you take some damage instead of just outright dying from memory. How do you like guardrail-less hallways with enemies that can potentially knock you back in them? With that said, the bottomless pits in this game are a double-edged sword. Yes, they can be lethal to you, but if you shoot enemies that fall when they get hit, be it the lightning bugs or the dragonflies, they too fall into the pit and technically die. The reason I say technically is because you didn't deplete their HP all the way. When you come back into that room, they will be back. But that still gets them out of the way and out of your hair for a little bit. With that said, this is also the most linear section of this part, so there's not really much you can do wrong here other than falling off into the pits for one reason or another. Honestly, it almost feels like an overcorrection for the game's poor movement controls. But I also can't help but wonder if the life hooks are here because of the camera system that's in the Japanese version. Because maybe the swinging and swaying of the camera alongside some of the odd fixed angles made it so that it was very easy to fall into certain pits on certain transitions. Also, you may have noticed Elliot, pause for a second there in that last room. By the way, and here's the Omega Club key. We can now use that to enter the strip club back at Lab Town. We'll be doing that, I think, next part. The reason Elliot paused there is the second time you enter that room, enemies are going to crash through the windows. I can't tell if it's meant to be a jump scare or them just trying to do something new for a change in this game. With that said, you never need to fight these groups of dragonfly enemies, so just run past them. And by and large, they're just bigger versions of the dragonflies we fought earlier, only I think they're honestly a little less aggressive. But I can't tell if that's an actual, mechanic thing, or if it's just my brain thinking that because of their larger frame, they're just slower to attack. It's not like you'll never have to fight any, though, because there is going to be one we eventually have to fight. Eventually. Yeah, my general advice here, take these rooms slowly. If you see an enemy, just open fire. You'll probably knock them right down to the pit and out of your hair. Alright, here we are. In this room, we need to at least kill one of these dragonfly enemies, namely the one I didn't just kill, because it's feasting on someone's corpse. And that corpse has a card key that we need to get out of this room. With that said, this particular dragonfly doesn't really attack. Its main strategy is to just get away from you, because you interrupted its meal. That's rude. Why are you trying to shoot it, man? Ow, come on! Actually, honestly, this is probably the most annoying version of these dragonfly enemies, because it does a really good job at avoiding your non-long-range attacks. But it's now holding the plant area card, which we can now use immediately to enter this next room. This game forces you, to fight enemies at a very odd rate. With that, we can now use the Condenser Room Key we got a few moments ago and enter the final room of the power plants. And this is, if you can't tell by the music, a boss fight room, so get out some bigger weapons. I'd recommend the shotgun, bowgun, or railgun.
This monster was sucking up all the juice.
We've got to get rid of them.
Alright, the boss time this time around is a bit of an odd one. It's actually more so an enemy barrage of slightly stronger versions, namely blue versions, of the lightning bug enemies from the previous area. My preferred weapon to use here is Elliot's shotgun, because its burst fire alongside range of attacks can hit multiple of these bugs at once. With that said, as you can see, when you attack them, they actively swarm you and can really combo you very well. It's very easy to take a lot of damage very quickly in this boss fight. With that said, if you've eaten at least one steak plate throughout the game and hit the shotgun with enough regularity, you'll probably survive even at base HP a larger one of their big barrages. It's just make sure you have some hassies on standby or something to heal. Otherwise, though, this boss is pretty easy.
We got the light.
Dogs, let's get out of here. Something's wrong.
Is it though, Elliot? What are you talking about, man? With that said, we are now done here in the power plant, and barring a cutscene in the next room, it's at this point I'm actually going to jump cut us back to the main power plant room that you had the emergency light switch, just to save us some time.
Janine, come in. Over. We're going back. I think she's in trouble.
With that said, our new goal is to get back to the command center, which means we're backtracking through more or less the past part and a half of level design. Not the biggest fan of that. With that said, when you get back to the control room of the power station, change your weapons up a little bit, because once you go back into the garage, we have a refight against the van Scorpion from last part. This is actually the van we saw earlier this very part in this garage, but now it's just a surprise boss fight. You don't need to fight this one, though. You can just ignore it. The thing you really want to do, though, is use the bazooka on the ground that was on top of that car initially for Elliot's. That is, by and large, his most damaging long-range weapon in the game. It really hurts. And for beating that, we get a car key. Technically optional, but still, it'll save you a little time later on. And the bazooka itself is honestly just worth grabbing there, because it really does do a lot of damage. Why they just make you refight that boss out of nowhere like that, I don't know. But hey, at least that means this game has boss fights, compared to certain other games which try to have boss fights, but they're more or less just buffed versions of normal enemies. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 7, we're trekking back through the satellite fields to get back to the command center. See you guys then.